Hey everybody, it's Hannah. I just want to put a little warning out there for parents who may listen to this show with their kids. Depending on how old your kids are, take a peek at the episode description to make sure that you are comfortable with them listening to the story so that you might have to answer some weird questions and everything. Just deals with some adult situations and all of that. So I just wanted to throw that warning out there.
Well, hello, Hannah.
Well, hello, Austin.
Welcome to episode 26, and all of you out there listening to us, welcome to episode 26. We were just talking about it. We haven't been in the studio for a week or two now.
A week or two? It's been a month, my man.
They don't need to know.
It's been a month.
No, yeah, it's been about a month. It's been a little bit of a nice break, and hopefully you guys all enjoyed episode 25.
Yeah.
Got some pretty good feedback. I've heard good feedback. What about you?
I haven't talked to too many people who listen, just because, no, I've been in the middle of switching jobs. I got a new job.
That's true. She has.
So I don't see a lot of my friends who listen to the podcast on the daily anymore. So do you have anything you want to share?
You know the folklore we have today, right?
The folklore we have today, that's very generic.
Folklore, cryptids, all that stuff, right?
Okay, yeah.
What if this proves time traveling is real, and somebody who's bored in the future comes back to the people who don't have all the technology, like in the 1700s or farther, and they have all this weird, spooky, sciencey stuff to make them look like a monster just to fuck with people to have a laugh?
I mean, I don't know what to say to that, Austin.
Random thought I had.
Okay.
That's what I was wanting. I had to write it down because I wanted to share it with you because I was hoping you would have something.
My brain's not working at full capacity, so I can't even go off on that one. I'm going to say okay.
But you can see how it could potentially.
I get where you're going with it. I got it.
When I was like, I have to write this down. I'm not going to remember it. It was like a late night, like shower thought kind of deal. That's
fair. I had found a couple things, and I went back to find the articles today, and I couldn't find them. But there is one thing I wanted to touch on in a bit more serious, somber note. Not that they need a shout out from us or anything, but I want to direct some people over to And That's Why We Drink to listen to episode 350. And specifically Christine's story about Heather Mayer. This is not a story that we are planning to cover as of right now due to proximity. I did not know Heather, but I was very close with a couple of the survivors in this situation, and I think it's a very important story to hear. It's a local Minnesota one, so I'm not going to go too much into it or talk about my connection to it, but I just want to point people over there because it's a very important story. So again, that's episode 350 of And That's Why We Drink, Christine's story, so it'll be in the second half of the episode. And just give it a listen, because it's a tragic story. It's very heart-wrenching, and I just think it's very important for people to hear it. So that's it. That's my little PSA this week.
Hannah out here just spreading the good word.
I just, the story needs attention and everything, and while due to multiple reasons I don't feel comfortable covering it, or just having us cover it in general, I wanted to take the chance, because we do have a very small platform, albeit, to just give people the chance to hear the story. Because as far as I know, there's really only one solid article out there about it. But Christine did a wonderful job at telling the story, and she got really all the details, as far as I know, in there. And, told what the police were saying, and then told the actual story of what happened and everything. Did a really thorough job, And That's Why We Drink, and their research team. So thank you to them for covering that story, because I know it hasn't had a lot of coverage, and it really deserves it. So, yeah. And with that, should we get into it?
I think we can get into her today. Where's the...
I don't know, you live here.
I sure do. I don't know.
You're the one who's been rearranging and everything.
Oh, yeah. Tails.
All right. Before I get started, I also forgot to mention when we started that I will put the I'll put in the episode description when this story comes so that people know. Just a little timestamp, so if they want to skip over it, or a little like from this to this, you know, because I know a few people do let their younger kids listen, and their kids will have questions if they listen to this story. So
fair enough.
That being said, I decided to just come in hot and chaotic. I'm going to be covering a haunted strip club.
Oh my god. Okay, I see the explicit warning to parents and their kids. All right. Well, let's take it away, Hannah.
All right, so we're going to be going to the Palomino Club in Las Vegas.
God, it sounds slutty.
It was founded in 1969.
Of course it was.
Nice.
Oh my god.
But the building was built in the 40s, and it used to be a supper club, and I heard somewhere else a cowboy bar. And it's
Is
in the
that
old
a euphemism?
No, actually, it's not like genuinely a supper club and like cowboy bar.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's in the oldest part of Vegas, which is downtown Vegas.
Okay.
So it's not on the Strip or anything.
Making total sense now.
Yep. So it's one of the few nightclubs if not the only, one of the few clubs in Vegas that's allowed to have a liquor license and fully nude dancers.
Oh.
As its licenses were grandfathered in when ordinances for strip clubs were amended in 1995. And they were granted this exception until 2025, but the current owner made it a permanent exception.
Huh.
So,
as one should, huh?
Yeah, so they got that going for them. In 2000, there was a high-profile murder case where the club owner's son, Jack Perry, shot an employee because he thought the employee was trying to take over the club.
This is some bad miscommunication there.
Well, yeah, there was like a lot of, like, Jack's dad had died. I believe his name was Paul. And so his mom became the owner of the club and let the general manager of the club move into the apartment that the owner would use when he was just, like, you know, super busy, needed a place to stay, stuff like that. Right, let him move in there. Okay. And the son did not like that and was like, what about me? And, like, just assumed that meant that this guy was going to get to take over the business. Jesus. And went ahead and grabbed a shotgun. So Perry pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 14 years to life in prison. So little wiggle room. But
just a little.
In 2002, another club tried to sue the Palomino for conspiring with cab drivers to divert customers to their club, which is apparently a pretty common practice, especially in Vegas. So cab drivers will get paid a little extra money per customer they bring to the club. So when people jump in and they're like, oh, take me to a strip club.
Oh, okay.
Ultimately, though, the case was dropped. In 2003, Luis Hidalgo Jr. took over ownership of the club and added an all-male act known as the Palomino Stallions, hoping to bring in more female customers. I think I heard somewhere that was actually his wife's idea.
Oh, gee, yeah.
And then jumping forward to 2005, Hidalgo Jr., his son, and his son's girlfriend found themselves being charged and eventually found guilty of a contract murder of a former employee. So this employee was Timothy T.J. Hadland, and he had been telling competitors that Hidalgo Jr. was still paying cab drivers to divert customers, which, as far as I know, was true. Hadland had been found shot dead on the side of the road near Lake Mead, which, from what I understand, is very near the club. Mm-hmm. In May 2005, just a couple of weeks after quitting his job at the club. And apparently when they found his body, Palomino flyers were scattered all around him. So, yeah, just dumb shit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Dumb shit. So in 2006, Hidalgo Jr. sold the club to the current owner, Adam Gentile, to cover his legal fees from the trial. Gentile's father was one of the most prominent defense attorneys in Vegas and represented Hidalgo. And while it wasn't explicitly said, everything I read made it sound like this sale was made in exchange for the representation of the trial, like during the trial. He was like, sell the club to my son, I'll represent you, or something along those lines happened.
Yeah.
And as of 2023, Gentile is still the owner of the club. And then the last little bit of history is that it's rumored that in the early 2000s, one of the dancers hung herself in the dressing room.
Oh, Jesus.
And I really couldn't find anything about that anywhere. I couldn't find a name or anything. There's actually not a lot of information on the internet about the hauntings.
Oh.
So before we get into the hauntings, let me tell you how I came across all this.
Yes, enlighten us.
So I told you about that new show on Hulu called Living for the Dead.
Yep, you did.
Literally everybody go watch this. I love it so much.
It's her current obsession.
A group of queer paranormal investigators, and they go to these places, usually businesses, with the intent of, doing an investigation, but also trying to help the people. They go to places where the hauntings are really affecting the people who are around these places all the time. So they don't just go in and, piss off the ghosts and then leave, like someone does. And
who shall rename Bagel Bites?
And then they normally do some spiritual work on top of it and everything, and they just get things good, and it's really beautiful. I love it. So with that being said, I was watching that show last night and they did this, and I was like, honestly, yeah, I'm just gonna cover that. So I rewatched the show today. I watched about half of the Ghost Adventures one, but it's from season 21, so not a great season. I basically watched it just for getting the stories from the people who work there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So with that being said, let's get into it.
Yay.
A lot of this information, not all of it, but a lot of it is from the shows. I'm not going to go through the episodes step by step all the way and everything. Go watch them for yourselves if you're interested, but there's some good stuff. So it seems that employees experience the majority of the hauntings, and it makes them incredibly uncomfortable. Some dancers are groped by unseen hands. They'll be on a stage away from the customers. A customer can't reach them, and they'll get groped, and they'll turn around to punch the asshole, and nobody's there. So
God, the ultimate violation.
I mean, how awful. It already sucks being groped, but you can't see the fucker.
Right.
Oh.
That's a whole new
There's a lot of emotions that come with that. So full body apparitions and shadow figures are seen, and footsteps can be heard in the underground tunnels, which lead in 3 different directions.
It's just underground tunnels.
Apparently there's a lot of underground tunnels in Vegas.
Mobsters.
Yeah, Vegas was basically built for the mobsters.
Oh, yeah.
And
It still is.
Yeah, so in the area above where the murder in 2000 had took place, while an employee named Jose was working on the area to renovate it, he said he had been using the wrong blade to cut wood, so it created a lot of smoke and dust. And out of the corner of his eye, he saw a leg, somebody had walked up and in his peripheral he saw a leg. And he looked up to see the silhouette of a man, being more defined by the smoke as it's swirling around it, standing there. And he tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't go away, so he ended up running out of the building.
Uh-oh,
and this was when he was brand new, if I remember correctly.
Welcome to the team.
Right. Another employee, Jamie, has said that she won't go in certain areas of the club if no one else is there because the feeling of a dark presence is so strong.
Heck.
And she's also had nightmares of being chased through the club, and when she turns around, no one's there. So
gross.
So Ghost Adventures brought in a well-known local Vegas medium named Helena Adams, and the episode aired in 2019, so I'm going to guess they filmed in 2018, 2019. And so they brought her in to do a cold reading at the beginning of their investigation, before they really did their lockdown and everything. She wasn't given any information about the location prior to her reading. She immediately said there was a lot of energy there, and she picked up on an angry woman as well as a man. And in the dressing room, when she stepped in there, she almost immediately said somebody had committed suicide there, and that she had been very sad when she did so. And she said that the spirit was stuck there and was trying to get out. And then with that, we're going to move on to Living for the Dead. So they were brought in because the den mother, Tina, didn't know what to do for her girls regarding the spirits. So a den mother kind of takes care of the dressing room and everything, makes sure that's all taken care of, but she also takes care of the girls, make sure they look good, get them products when they need it, food, she's a mother. She said she can protect them from flesh and blood, but when it comes to the dead, she doesn't know what to do. She kind of was feeling helpless by the time they brought this group in.
Oh, poor lady.
So pretty soon after coming in, Alex, one of the investigators, stated that it felt like they were in a vortex of energy. She set up a REM pod near them while they were chatting with Tina and a couple of the dancers, and the employees told them that the dressing room and the blue room are the most active spots. One dancer said that one night when she was up in the blue room giving a dance, through one of the sheer curtains that were hanging, she saw a perfect ball or an orb of smoke, and it just stayed where it was for a while. She said she even watched one of her managers walk straight through it, and it didn't disappear then. But, later it finally disappeared.
And the manager didn't see it?
No.
Just only she could see it?
Yeah, as far as I know.
That's wild. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God.
There's one hallway that employees say feels oppressive and heavy when they walk through it. And one dancer was pushed down the stairs one time. Yep, God. And then there was a customer that was once pushed in the bathroom when no one else was in there.
Oh.
Yep. God. So while they were having this conversation with the employees, they started to hear something moving upstairs very loudly. And, you can hear it in the shot while they're talking and everything. And somebody goes, "Do you hear that?" It almost sounds like furniture moving to me.
Oh, scraping against the hardwood floor?
Yeah, a little bit. It was just, very, something was, banging around up there. Oh. Yeah. And so one of the investigators just casually asked if there was someone upstairs, and the REM pod that they set up went off.
Oh, of course. Because why wouldn't it?
So they asked to confirm that someone was with them using the REM pod, and it immediately went off again. And then a little bit later, when another investigator asked the dancers if they thought that there was more than one energy, the REM pod lit up again.
Yeah, bitch.
Right.
We all up in here.
So toward the end of this conversation, one of the mediums in the group, Logan, had said that he was starting to feel really angry and irritable, and he's like, "I'm enjoying everything we're talking about and I'm loving you guys, but I'm getting so upset and irritable right now, and I know it's not my own emotions."
Oi.
Yeah.
Oi. That's not good.
So while one investigator, I think it was Alex, was in the dressing room, she was talking about the atmosphere and how it felt like she was standing on something electric when one of the lights above the mirrors fell down with no explanation.
I mean, as lights do.
Right.
It seems pretty normal to me.
And she was like, "I really don't have any idea how that felt." These lights were attached above the mirrors, and I mean, granted the room was dark, but it looked pretty solid, and it just fell. Right, which I thought was interesting because she was talking about the electric feeling in the room. So it was something that's
all of a sudden
has that electricity running through it. So I thought that was interesting. And then, while two of the mediums, it was Logan and their resident witch, Juju, they were using a pendulum in the blue room, and one of them started getting provoked by a mean, oppressive spirit. And it was Logan who was getting provoked. It basically started bullying him, saying things to him that were specifically triggering and very upsetting. And it's really interesting when you watch. You can see him physically recoiling and reacting to it, and you can watch he's just trying to shake it off really hard. He said that at the same time as this one spirit was bugging him and poking at him and pulling at his ear, there was a female spirit on the other side who was caressing his head, trying to comfort him.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which, he didn't have a problem with that, but, this other one was, just being obnoxious, being awful to him. So the spirit was getting physical with him. You could tell, he was, kind of, jumping away from it a little bit and, trying to pull himself away from it. And the provoking got to the point that the whole team ended up going outside with Logan because he was a mess.
Oh, I could imagine.
And his, final point before he got up and was like, "I need to get out of here," his necklace unclasped by itself.
Oh, yeah,
seemingly.
as necklaces do.
Yeah,
just
right.
The tiny little clasp in the back.
Yep, and he was like, nope, you know what? No, my necklace fell.
We're done.
Right, pretty much. So as soon as they stepped outside, you could see Logan, relax and start to feel like himself again. It was it just melted off of him.
He walked through a wall and just it all went away.
Yeah, and after that, they realized that they were dealing something with that really wasn't to be messed with. It was more serious than they anticipated.
Right.
Juju, the witch, I think I already mentioned, but she's also a medium. And while they were having this conversation and the spirit was trying to provoke Logan, she started talking about how she was getting really strong, misogynistic, homophobic, and sexist energies. She was picking up on that. She was super strong. Mm-hmm. So Roz, their researcher, had been looking into the land and the place while everybody else was, like, starting to do, like, some little, like, preliminary investigations. She found that where the building stands used to be an area that was heavily associated with the Church of Latter-day Saints. It was connected with old Mormon forts and an LDS ranch that was meant to convert and colonize basically anybody they could get their hands on.
Well, that explains the hatred.
The hatred, the oppression, the religious oppression,
Yep.
and everything.
Wow.
So for those who don't know, the Church of Latter-day Saints are, like, bad Mormons. They're very controversial. They've been known to marry off very young girls to, like, old men. There's been issues with, like, finances. They're very, like, strict, Christian Mormon group. I looked into it because I was going to try to give a little bit, but, like, there's so much to it. So we're just going to say they're bad Mormons.
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. They're very extreme in some areas.
There's some great documentaries out there surrounding them, and that involve, like, some survivors who have escaped and everything.
Oh.
So I would check those out, look into those, but if you want to know more.
I'm going to, yes.
So while using a spirit box, a voice came through and identified itself as Perry, which was the original owner's name.
Oh, I was going to say platypus.
No. No, not the platypus. He even confirmed it a second time when they asked if Perry was there, and he said yes. Very shortly after that, F-slurs, like the gay ones, started coming through.
Oh.
Like, like a slur for a queer person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said F-slur?
Yeah, F-slur.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So, at first, they thought it said fat. And then it said the full word, and I think they were like, oh, wait a minute.
Wait a minute. It did it? Oh, okay.
So then Roz asked the spirit what they thought of gay people, and it answered freaks.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So eventually a female voice came through and said, now, go. So they're like, all right, we're going to move on.
Bye.
We're going to move on to another area. So they kind of split up. Roz was sitting and talking to the spirits alone with a REM pod. She was just sitting in, like, a dark area. She had a camera set up, the REM pod near her, and a flashlight. And she was just looking around and talking. And they had started responding a little bit, and she asked if they liked her, and she got what was the answer no, with how they were interacting with the REM pod. And she was like, oof, okay. Well, here's the deal. I just want to have a chat. I want you to be nice.
Preach it, sister.
Right, it was super funny. And then to end on, because like I said, I'm not going to go through the full episode, but to end on, later they brought out the spirit box again, and the word ass came through. So they asked what else the spirit liked, and it said titties.
Because who doesn't?
Ass and titties. So that's that. I saw something. Apparently the owner had turned the upstairs into a haunt during spooky season, a couple nights out of the...
This sounds like an HR nightmare.
Right, yes.
If these ghosties are groping people.
Right, exactly, yeah. So I don't know if that's still a thing. I think it was around 2012-ish that he had started doing that. So I don't know if it's still a thing or anything like that, but... yeah, at the end of the Living for the Dead episode, they sat down with some of the employees, and Juju helped them make protective talismans. It looked like they had done, like, a little cleansing. They told them how to basically set their boundaries and be firm with the spirits and, like, let them know, like, I'm in charge now. Because one of the spirits is obviously the old owner, and they kind of came to the conclusion that he didn't like how the place was being run. Mm-hmm. Because now... exotic dancing, strippers, sex work, and everything like that is really a way for a lot of people to, like, reclaim their power and to find empowerment in themselves and everything. And they figure that he doesn't really like that, and that he was, sexist, misogynistic, all those shitty things.
Well, like most men from that era are.
Yeah, so... the investigators had found that basically when they were like, here's the deal, the nice spirits, we need you to help us kick out the bad spirits. You need to, like, make them leave. And the good spirits were all for that. And Juju had said she heard them like almost like chanting to the bad spirits, "Get out, get out, get out." So, and they said like after they had like done that, just those like really affirming words and everything, that the place already felt a lot lighter and a lot more bearable to be in. It felt safer, a lot calmer. So that's what I like, is that they have like really positive, they're not like, here's what we found, there's definitely ghosts, to these people who know that there's ghosts there.
Like, oh, you don't fucking say.
They teach you how to deal with it. Yeah, what is their slogan is something like helping the living by healing the dead or something like that, which I really liked. So it's very wholesome, and the whole spiritual aspect is really interesting to me, and watching people actually do it that way. Like I said, they're not just going in there to provoke and to try to get a reaction out of the spirits and everything.
Try to make a reality TV show. Yeah,
so it's really good. It's on Hulu. It just came out in October. Go check it out. I want them to renew it for more seasons, so everybody go watch it, please. And with that, let's move on to Austin's story.
Awesome. It was good. It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm probably going to Las Vegas in April, actually.
Oh.
So now you give me another thing to go out and look at, potentially take pictures. I definitely...
No, you don't get to take pictures in there.
No, like outside kind of deal. Like I'm not going inside. I'm going to be right honest with you right now, and I've mentioned this before. I have never set foot in a strip club, nor do I ever want to set foot in a strip club.
I've never gone to a strip club.
It just doesn't.
I wouldn't mind it, but like
intrigue
it's also
me. It doesn't
just,
like. I don't get it.
I just know how awkward I am, and I'd be like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to look. I don't like.
Well, you're supposed to be looking at what they're shaking in front of you.
Exactly, but I feel bad, even though that's what they're there for. That's what they get paid for.
Look at their tatas.
All right.
Today on my story, we're talking about one man who has been brought up numerous times by suggestions, people. That man is H.H. Holmes. Yeah. So, without further ado, let's dig into the horrifying person he was.
All right, let's go.
So, H.H. Holmes was born on May 16th, 1861 in New Hampshire, and was born under the name Herman Webster Mudgett. Mudgett.
Okay.
Yes.
Where does the second H come from?
Oh, we'll get into how he dons the name H.H. Holmes.
Okay.
He was the third child to Levi Mudgett and Theodate Price.
Theodate Price.
Doesn't that just sound so sophisticated?
It does.
Theodate.
What a name.
Right? Like, that's a...
I love that for her.
I don't know. Is Levi, though?
Well, if the last names... I would assume that since his last name was Mudgeon, that the father's last name is Mudgeon, and then Theodate Price. Price is probably her maiden name.
You know, you make a lot of sense, Hannah, and I didn't look at it that way. So, I was just focused on Theodate. I'm like, that sounds like a really great name.
Either way, it's a phenomenal name. Good for her. Good for them, just in case we got it wrong.
Both Holmes's parents were devout Methodists, and his father was from a farming family and would work as a farmer sometimes. He also did jobs like trading and painting, and no shock, he was a heavy drinker.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thunk it? Who would mistreat his family? And Holmes' mistreatment didn't stop at home. He was regularly bullied at school for having outstanding academic capabilities. So this kid was smart.
So he was like the classic nerd stereotype.
Very much so.
Got it.
Back in the late 1800s here.
Okay.
And one day at school, Holmes was forced to put the classroom's skeleton's hand on his face for the bullies in an attempt to frighten him. Holmes at first was terrified, but later found the experience to be intriguing and calming.
Oh my god, you know what? I've heard this before. I've only been like vaguely familiar with H.H. Holmes since I saw the suggestions and everything. But now that you said that, it just unlocked the whole thing. Like, this is a crazy one.
Yes.
It's wild.
It is. He claims the experience also helped him overcome his worries, and after that, Holmes developed an obsession with death, even taking up dissecting animals as a hobby.
Of course.
Because why wouldn't you?
Jesus Christ.
Holmes graduated from Gilmanton Academy with honors when he was just 16 years old. And then a few years later, he fell in love with a woman named Clara Lovering.
Lovering?
Lovering. Can't say it as one word. Lovering.
There you go.
There we go. And on July 4th, 1878, they married. They had one son named Robert Lovering Mudgett. And in 1882, Holmes decided to get serious with his life and went to the University of Michigan's Department of Medical and Surgery. While he was enrolled at this school, he worked in the anatomy lab, because this sounds right on par.
Because of course he did.
Mm-hmm. Under the guidance of Professor William James Herdman. At the time, Professor Herdman was the chief anatomy instructor. And by accounts, it was said that the two would facilitate grave robbing to make sure that they had enough cadavers on hand at the school.
I mean, yeah.
Might as well.
Might as well.
Don't ask anybody for the cadavers at the morgue, but just go dig them up. It's fine.
Well, it was illegal at the time to donate your body, and it was like, not illegal. Sorry, it was highly frowned upon due to religious beliefs.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so, like, I think we've talked about Burke and Hare a little bit. They were like the grave robbers. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it was frowned upon. So bodies couldn't just be donated for science. And I think it was, I can't remember how long after this whole grave robbing issue stopped being an issue. Mm-hmm. But once people were allowed to donate their bodies, it became substantially less of an issue.
Which, I mean, it should. We want to learn more about us. Let people donate their bodies. Well, what are they going to do with it? They're dead.
Exactly. And usually it was professors or students with very well-lined pockets who were actually paying for the cadavers. It wasn't the schools.
Makes even more sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Bunch of freaks. So 2 years later, in June of 1884, Holmes had graduated after passing his board exams. And during the last year of school, some of his housemates noticed that Holmes would get physically violent with Clara. And in his last year of college, Clara left him before they even graduated. She moved back to her hometown in New Hampshire, and speaking to him very little afterwards, only when necessary.
Good.
Shortly after graduating, Holmes moved to New York, and some years later, after graduating, he was actually suspected of murder while living in New York. After being questioned, it was found that Holmes used the cadavers to defraud life insurance companies. He would use the cadavers to fake his own death and pretend to be the beneficiary to claim upwards of $10,000 per fraud.
Jesus.
And he did this on several different occasions.
I mean, like, it's not a bad way to make money, but the morals.
Oh, yeah. The principle behind it, the moral. Like, oy vey.
I'm not condoning it. It's a problem, but sometimes I think about the amount of money you can make, and I'm like, Jesus. Like, right. I get why people get it in their head.
It's a lot of
I'm not saying I do it, but I get why people do.
Not saying he's right.
It's not right, but
it's understandable in a way.
Right.
Also, while living in New York, rumors started to spread about Holmes. The rumor was Holmes had been seen with a younger boy who later disappeared. When interviewed, Holmes claimed the boy went back home, which was in Massachusetts. After Holmes was questioned, the police decided no further investigation was required. Shortly after, Holmes had left town rather quick, and from there he traveled all the way to Philadelphia. He took a job as a keeper at Norristown State Hospital. Keeper is like a, what do you call him? Housekeeper kind of deal, like cleaning the bed sheets and all that stuff, keeping all the fresh linen.
Custodial stuff.
That's the word I was looking for, custodial. But quit shortly after he was hired to take a position at a drugstore in Philadelphia. And during this time at the drugstore, a boy died after taking some medication that was purchased. Holmes denied having any responsibility in the boy's death, as well as anybody else that worked at the drugstore. But, again, as soon as the questioning was done, he left town, and he ended up in Chicago.
All right.
And once he made his way to Chicago, he changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes.
All right, there we go.
We're getting there. We're not at H.H. Holmes yet, by the way.
We're not at H.H. Holmes yet, but we're close.
We're getting close. He's no longer Mudgett. He's Holmes. He's Holmes. Mudgett is Holmes. This was also to hopefully avoid the possibility of being exposed by any of his victims that he scammed, or have the rumors in New York follow him around. And by late 1886, Holmes had met and married Myrta Belknap. And
everybody's got interesting names.
They really do. The 1800s are wild for names, it seems like.
Yeah.
I have yet to find a not interesting name.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. And a little side note, Holmes and Myrta were married in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, all right.
Also, when he married Myrta, he was also still technically married to Clara.
Well, okay.
Holmes would file for a divorce from Clara a few weeks after marrying Myrta.
It just slipped his mind.
Yep. Oh yeah, I guess I was married to her. But he claims infidelity on Clara's part. But these claims could not be proven. After some time of going back and forth in court, the divorce process never continued. We're not going to get into his third marriage, but his third marriage was in 1894 to Georgiana Yoke, and he was still married to Clara and Marta at the time, too. He was married to 3 different women at once.
Well, I mean, if he's in different areas, like, the paperwork's just not going to be there, so yeah, you can file it. You have no way to cross-reference it.
I mean, yeah, this is true.
I get why it was so easy to commit insurance fraud and, like, to marry multiple people, like, do stuff like that. It would just... It was a wild and lawless time.
Lawless is right. So, back to 1886, where Holmes was settling quite nicely into his Chicago life, and Holmes began using the pseudonym H.H. Holmes.
Okay.
He found work at a drugstore, and he would eventually go on to buy the drugstore, and his purchasing wouldn't stop there. There was an empty lot across the street that Holmes would purchase the following year in 1887, and this would become a multi-story / multi-use building. The first floor housed an entire drugstore. Mm-hmm. The second was apartments and retail spaces, and the third floor is yet to come, but that was used as a hotel. Mm-hmm. In 2 years later, once construction was finished in 1889, the architect and steel companies took Holmes to court due to him declining to pay for the work once the work was done.
Did he have a reason?
Nope.
Just didn't feel like it.
It's like, I declined to pay.
Man, I wish I could do that when my car payment rolls around. Just be like, I don't feel like paying it this month.
Nah.
Try
me again next month.
Oh my god. Again, a wild and lawless time.
But ultimately, Holmes did lose, and the companies got their money.
Okay, so not entirely lawless.
Not entirely lawless. There are some reports that Holmes would use this multi-use building to lure in tourists, because around this time, the Chicago's World Fair was happening.
Mm-hmm. It sure was.
He would kill them and sell their skeletons to medical schools. Holmes did, in fact, have a history of selling stolen cadavers to schools, which was all done through grave robbing, obviously. Yeah. But there was no hard evidence during this time to prove the reports of him killing people and selling their skeletons to schools. Mm-hmm. And finally, in 1892, Holmes would build that third floor as a hotel. And the Yellow Press got some apparently wild accusations, and they labeled this building as the Murder Castle.
Yeah.
Claiming the building contained secret rooms, such as torture chambers, trapdoors, gas chambers, as well as a crematorium in the basement. Mm-hmm. But after some investigations, these claims were all found to be false. But during this time, Holmes would still commit insurance frauds throughout the U.S. Mm-hmm. Again, performing his scam of digging up cadavers and collecting the life insurance, he actually had an accomplice named Benjamin Pitzel, who pretended to be the dead guy every now and then.
Pretended to be the dead guy.
Pretended to be the dead guy. Holmes would go and find a cadaver that would look pretty much like him, and like, yep, see, he's dead. Give me the money.
Crazy.
Right?
Oh my god, they just had it all figured out. Real slick business. Like,
slicker than shit, my guy. But all this would come to an end as Chicago would be would slide into an economic slump due to the end of the Chicago World Fair. Holmes abandoned his 2 drugstores and his multi-use building and turned to stealing horses from Texas and selling them in St. Louis, Missouri.
Right, of course.
Yeah, because
that has to be the next move. That's the only obvious option.
Bodies to horses. So it's a career advancement.
Jesus.
But this finally caught up with him, and he was sent to jail for stealing horses and swindling people out of money. And during his time in jail, he befriended his cellmate, Moran Hedgepath.
Okay. Yeah, another good name.
Hedgepath.
Hedgepath.
And Holmes got Moran into his usual scams. He told him to fake his own death, and so they could collect the $10,000 life insurance policy. And in return, he'd give Moran a part of the money, plus a lawyer, to help out if any problems were to arise. Funny enough, he has a lawyer that's on his side that's just going along with these scams to help with the legal implications.
He's probably getting paid a shit ton of money from these insurance policies.
Here's like $3,000 to tell me how to not go to prison.
Right? Oh, jeez.
I mean, you can think about $10,000 back then, though.
There's a lot of money.
I should have done the conversion, but that's got to be millions today, if not more. Mm-hmm. Once Holmes was released from prison, he attempted the insurance scam with Moran, but didn't go through with it. This made Moran very, very upset, as he did not get his money he was promised, and told police all about Holmes' intentions in the scam.
He's like, okay, guys, hear me out.
Yeah.
I know what I did was wrong, but I'm fessing up.
There's this guy, H.H. Holmes, you see?
Let me tell you about this motherfucker.
And while all this is going on, Holmes was back in Philadelphia with his accomplice, Benjamin. They had a plan to fake Benjamin's death, and his wife, Carrie, would be able to take the life insurance policy. Holmes would take care of finding the cadaver, obviously, so to play the role of the dead Benjamin.
The dead Benjamin.
The dead Benjamin.
I think that's going to be the episode name.
The dead Benjamin. But Holmes had another idea in mind.
Of course he did.
Holmes ultimately killed Benjamin by knocking him unconscious with chloroform and then setting his body on fire with benzene.
Jesus.
With Benjamin's body charred, he was able to collect the insurance payout. And Holmes would go on to manipulate Carrie.
So wait, what did he tell them happened? Was he like, I don't know, he spontaneously combusted? Like, were they not like, why is he crispy?
They saw he was dead. They confirmed it was him, and
no question.
No,
Jesus.
There was going through this. There was a lot of lacking of questioning around here during this time.
Obviously.
Like, I'm like, they just okay. It like. I feel like a lot of this could have been stopped if they asked one simple question.
Right, if they just asked like 1 or 2 more questions.
Like, why?
Would have saved a lot of people a lot of trouble.
Holmes would go on to manipulate Carrie, lying about her husband Benjamin's death, and as well somehow manipulating her into allowing him to have custody of 3 of her 5 children.
Just 3 of them?
Just 3 of them.
Were they all his? Nobody knows. I'm going to guess.
No, they were Benjamin and Carrie's.
Oh, they were. Okay.
And Holmes took custody of three of them.
Just 3 of them.
Just 3 of them. Those 3 were Alice, who was 13, Nellie, who was 9, and Howard, who was 7.
And let me guess, he took out life insurance policies on each of them.
Yes. How'd you know?
Just a wild guess.
Holmes would travel throughout the U.S. and Canada, sometimes bringing Alice and Nellie and Howard along. He would also travel under various aliases. One was, if I remember correctly, was Harry Gordon. He would just go by.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Holmes had a rental home in Toronto, Canada, where he would frequent with the children. Holmes would return back to the U.S. one time without the children. He would give Carrie every single line in the book, manipulating her to her whereabouts of her children.
Oh,
like, awesome. Basically just making up things like, oh yeah, they're back there, they're being taken care of, it's fine.
Was she aware of, like, the scams that he pulled?
Oh yeah, very much aware, but yet trusted him.
Can you imagine, like, your kids, you don't have a way to get hold of them, it's like fucking late 1800s.
Yeah, it's 1892 at this time.
Yeah, exactly, like, oh my god, and you somehow are just, you knew it was in the back of her mind, you just know.
So Carrie finally called police and reported her children missing.
Good.
And when it was found Holmes was the last one seen with him, a second investigation was taken out against him. The first one was into the scam that Marone told him about. Mm-hmm. The second was into a missing persons investigation.
Yeah.
The investigation was led by police detective Frank Geyer. Holmes' rental home in Toronto was vacant, and police were able to search the home. And what they found was absolutely shocking. In the basement of the home were the bodies of Nellie and Alice, buried 3 feet underground, decomposed, showing they both had been there for quite some time.
Oh, poor babies.
During the investigation, it was found Holmes had another rental property in Indianapolis.
I mean, of course he did. He had all that money from the insurance policies. He's just got houses everywhere.
Like safe houses, basically.
Holmes got homes.
Holmes not Holmes on Holmes, no copyright. Holmes got homes.
Right?
And in the home in Indianapolis is where investigators found Nellie and Alice's brother, Howard. Mm. And they found his teeth and bones. And finally, 2 years later, on November 17th, Holmes was caught. Frank Geyer and his team tracked Holmes down from Philadelphia all the way to Boston, where he was promptly arrested. He was originally arrested for an outstanding warrant for horse theft in Texas.
Forgot about the horse theft.
Yeah. That's still a thing. And Holmes was taken back to Chicago. And his murder castle was searched thoroughly. Upon investigation of the building, it was found possible fragment of human bones, possible remains of a child, a burned gold watch, a tuft of human hair in the chimney inside of a bank book.
Wow.
Right?
That's
some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But after the search was completed, these items were found to be reported as circumstantial evidence.
Okay.
Meaning they couldn't tie any of this evidence to Holmes in his own murder
Even
castle.
though they had investigated the castle before.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And ultimately, Holmes would be tried for the murder of Benjamin. When Holmes was interviewed, he did admit to murdering Benjamin, as well as Nellie, Alice, and Howard. He murdered Nellie and Alice by locking them both in the trunk of his vehicle while in Toronto, drilled a hole through the trunk, put a tube inside, and poured gasoline through the tube, and they died of asphyxiation.
No.
Once they were dead, he buried them 3 feet underneath the ground in the basement.
Those poor girls.
Didn't deserve any of that.
I can't even imagine, like, the fear. Your father throwing you in a trunk.
Not their step legal guardian, basically.
Okay, but regardless, your father figure.
Yeah, or supposedly father figure.
Throwing you in a trunk, drilling a hole into it, and now there's this fucking stinky-ass liquid being poured in there, and then you're probably dazed and confused for a while before you fall asleep or pass out.
Exactly.
Like oh.
They didn't know what was coming.
Poor babies.
And as for Howard, Holmes purchased some drugs from a pharmacy, made Howard take them, and OD on them. Then proceeded to cut up his body and shove the bones and teeth inside the rental home's chimney in Indianapolis.
What? Oh my God.
That was one of the most fucked up things I've read in quite a while.
Jesus. Can you imagine if they hadn't found them and there was like a contractor working on the house like 100 years later?
Oh my God.
And you just find all these children's bones like shoved in between the... Jesus.
No thanks. As well, during these interviews, Holmes confessed to roughly 27 murders. But this may have been a stretch due to the fact that some of the names Holmes gave investigators were in fact still alive when they went to go search records.
Well, I mean, he's probably getting a little mixed up with all these fucking insurance frauds and murders and horse thefts and...
He's got so much going on.
He's got a lot going on. He's a busy man.
Clearly. Wanted to go over some of the presumed murders that Holmes committed.
Right.
First being 31-year-old Julia Smythe. Her and her husband moved into one of the apartments Holmes had built, and Julia's husband found out that Holmes and Julia were having an affair. He moved leaving Julia and their 5-year-old daughter Pearl behind. And on Christmas Eve, Julia and Pearl would never be seen again.
No.
Holmes claims Julia left unexpectedly to visit her dying sister. But when asked again, he would change his story, saying she fled because of her husband and she was afraid of him. He changed his story yet again, saying that she died during an abortion, which Holmes would have performed.
Of course he did.
And because abortion death rates were so high back in the late 1800s...
They just took his word for it, didn't they?
It was somewhat believable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He went to a medical type school and had the training to do...
Oh, that's right. He did.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So they didn't question it.
Of course.
Now, remember when I said that there was the remains of a possible child were found?
Yeah.
These are now believed to be Pearl, the 5-year-old daughter of Julia.
Oh, no.
It still could not be proven, but investigators have a pretty good idea that it probably is.
Yeah. Oh, did he? Yeah, he still had the murder castle all through this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Jesus.
His murdering spree started 1889 to 1894. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
The next would be 24-year-old Wilhelmina Williams, or Minnie for short.
Oh.
Holmes would offer her a job while he was in Boston under the alias Harry Gordon. The job was to be a stenographer, which is a big fancy word for shorthand writing. Mm-hmm. She would help him transfer deeds with scams Holmes would perform. Whether she knew about Holmes and his true nature with these scams is still unknown. And after July in 1983, Minnie would never be seen or heard from again. And Holmes would go on to use her name in future scams.
Of course.
Because why not?
Why not? He, just has it all figured out.
Mm-hmm. Now we have some suspected murders of H.H. Holmes.
Okay.
First would be John DeBrule. Died after Holmes poured some black liquid down his throat, according to witnesses. But investigation found that there was no foul play. But investigators believe this was another Holmes scam to acquire life insurance money. Mm-hmm. Next we have Emily Tassel. She went missing after last being seen working at one of Holmes' drugstores. Holmes spoke of her in his confessions, but never gave any details on a possible murder.
Okay.
Yep, she worked for me, and yep, I knew she went missing.
And I definitely didn't murder her.
Exactly, yeah. Because he couldn't do that. No possible way.
Couldn't be me.
Next would be Dr. Rustler. Dr. Rustler rented one of the retail spaces to make an office out of in Holmes' multi-use building and went missing shortly after 1982. Holmes did mention killing...
1982?
1892.
There we go.
And went missing shortly after 1892. And during the interview, Holmes did mention killing Rustler, but never told investigators where a potential body or remains would be.
Did they check the chimneys?
I'm pretty sure they checked the chimneys pretty thoroughly after the first two.
Right after those first couple of things.
Maybe we should look there more. Oh. Next we have Kitty Kelly, who worked for Holmes and went missing while working for Holmes in 1892 as well. Harry Walker went missing in 1893 and alleged having a life insurance policy where Holmes was the beneficiary for $20,000. Harry would also write to his friends and family while he was working for Holmes in Chicago. And after a while, his friends and family never got any type of letter and was never heard from again. Next we have George Thomas, who was murdered by Holmes and Benjamin, claims Holmes. Holmes confessed this to his second wife, Myrta, but no body was discovered or details were given to where a body could be found. Next would be Milford Cole, disappeared after receiving a telegram from Holmes asking him to come to Chicago. It was found he made it to Chicago, but disappeared shortly after arriving. Lucy Burbank was a possible victim. Remember that tuft of hair I was talking about that police found?
Yeah.
The bank book belonged to her, and the hair was very similar to her hair color that she had.
Okay.
But with no means of examining the hair, they couldn't verify that it belonged to Lucy. So, here comes the big day. Holmes was finally put on trial in October 1895. Holmes ultimately was found guilty of the murder of Benjamin Pitzel and was sentenced to death by being hung by the neck until dead. And
launched into eternity.
Launched. Skyrocketed. And on May 7th, 1896, Holmes was hung at Mayo Menzing Prison in Philadelphia. And here are some accounts of how Holmes's last moments were. He was very calm and amiable, showing very few signs of fear or being anxious. And before being hung, Holmes asked if his coffin could be buried in cement and 10 feet underground. In his words, so his body could not be dug up and dissected.
That's rich. That's real fucking rich.
The nerve on this man.
I just have to imagine they were like, no.
And shortly after he asked for his request, the executioner pulled the lever, and Holmes' neck did not break.
Oh, that's right.
But instead slowly strangled him to death.
Was that not maybe the point? Because he was hung until dead.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's the whole thing of being hung until dead. If your neck doesn't break, that's a slow, painful death.
Yeah, no.
You want your neck to break if you're getting hung.
Yeah, I was like, that verbiage is very specific.
Right? It was said Holmes hung there, twitching for around 15 minutes before he was pronounced dead. Holmes was buried in an unmarked grave in a Catholic cemetery and was buried as requested.
Oh, I was really hoping they were just going to go right ahead and dissect him.
Me too. When I read that, I was like, oh, well, that's unfortunate. But in 2017, some allegations came up that Holmes potentially escaped his execution.
What?
Yeah, right?
What?
This is why. This is wild.
But they watched him die. Fucking.
You can't believe paper accounts.
H.H.
So to confirm this allegation, his grave was dug up and broke through all that concrete. Once dug up, Holmes' body was examined, and come to find out, his body wasn't decomposing properly, basically due to...
Well, I was going to say with the cement, it probably sealed it.
Literally, exactly. Yeah. And his clothes and mustache, they made sure they put an emphasis on mustache. His clothes and mustache were still perfectly intact due to the concrete that was poured around his coffin. And that big old mustache that he had.
Handlebar. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Perfect.
A century-old dead mustache, still perfectly intact.
So while examining the body, they got old dental records and examined the teeth and positively ID'd this body as Holmes. And then he was reburied. He
was slick, but he wasn't that slick.
Nope.
Did they pour more concrete, or did they just leave it?
If I remember correctly, they just left it.
Okay.
They just were burying him.
They're like, he can decompose now.
I have one more little thing before I wrap up here on the murder castle. Little side note. It was damaged by being set on fire in 1895, a year after he was captured. 2 men could be seen running from the scene. But the building did end up surviving and was still used as apartments until 1938, before being torn down when it was condemned. The site where the building stood is currently being occupied by United States Postal Office.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So you can go visit it, but you might as well mail a letter while you're there.
Yeah, I guess. Huh.
I was also curious if any there's any spirits attached to the land or something, if there was some paranormal stuff that happened in the post office, but didn't really have anything on that.
Yeah.
So that is the life and terrible person that H.H. Holmes was.
All right.
I hope for the fans that requested H.H. Holmes, I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you for covering that. That was a really good story.
I was enamored by it. I was I got into it, but I was sometimes it takes me a little bit, but I was right out of the gate.
Yeah.
It was great.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, are you ready for a cemetery fun fact?
I want to hear the cemetery fun fact.
All right. So, bells on a grave. The fear of someone being buried alive led coffin makers to design caskets with an internal chain attached to a bell on the grave. Mm-hmm. If the person should awake, they would pull the bell and alert the community to their premature burial. Hence the saying, "For whom the bell tolls."
Also from where the saying, "Come saved by the bell," too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how many sayings we have, or even just things that we know, come from such a dark, interesting past.
Right. And that they survived so long and they mean
Right.
something completely different now.
And it's usually all just through verbal communication, too.
Yeah, it's just passed down verbally.
Better word, passed down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that is episode 26. I don't think we have any crazy announcements or anything. But for those of you who subscribe on Patreon, we'll see you guys over on the auditorium.
It's going to be a good one, guys.
Do you want to give them a little sneak peek?
So the little sneak peek for those of you who have our Patreon and who may be interested in, we're actually talking about national parks and the people who go missing.
Yeah, it's an epidemic.
It really is. So if you want to listen, if you want to hear more, head on over to the auditorium on our Patreon page. It is $3 to subscribe, and you get all the content that your little hearts can desire.
And you get all the old content, too.
All the old content as well, exactly. You get from start to all the way till now.
Yeah, you get all the few Tangent Tuesdays we did, and then you get every auditorium, and sometimes we post extra stuff on there. So head on over there if you're interested.
Or don't. We can't force you to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, do what you want. But, it'd be nice. We'd like to have some more friends over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is...
I think that does it for this week. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. If you guys have any suggestions for stories, let us know. But with that, we're going to go and do the auditorium.
See you there, guys.
Bye. The Bleeding Grave is hosted by Hannah Slavic and Austin Winger.
Music by Hannah Slavic.
You can find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
You can listen to The Bleeding Grave on Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and more.